I've been dying to record this video for the whole year. I can't wait to tell you about all the 25 books that Eric bought for me that I finally finished reading. Let's do it! Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Maile if you're new here, and I'm already in a hyped mood about this video, so just get ready for some real chaotic energy, okay? So my sweet husband Eric, one of my Christmas presents this year was an advent calendar of books that he hand curated for me. He picked every single book, he hand wrapped them, he made cute little cutout numbers for each one, and I got to open one book a day in December. So I have very quickly been making my way through all of those books so that I can share them all with you, because you guys, he's so sweet. He knows I like romance, and that is the lane he stuck to. So I have read 25 romance books. I'm gonna need to take a little break from romance books now that I'm done with these, but there are so many in this grouping that I never would have picked out for myself that became 5-star reads. And I'm so excited to share them with you. So the way we're gonna do this is fast and dirty, okay? I'm gonna tell you a little bit about each book, what I liked, what I didn't like, and the rating that I gave each book on Goodreads. First book that I read was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. This is book 1 in the Dreamland Billionaires series. The series is about 3 brothers who are set to inherit their family company, which is a knockoff of the Disney company. There's multiple theme parks throughout the world called Dreamland. There's a streaming service. There's incredible movies, there's classic characters. I mean, it is Disney and Disney World and all the Disney company conglomeration if they were owned by one man who died and set these inheritance rules for his 3 grandsons to earn their inheritance and take over the company. This book follows the middle brother's journey to gaining his inheritance. The love story in this is so sweet. There's lots of Imagineering in this one. This one is the most theme park heavy. It's set in Dreamland, in the theme park that's supposed to be like Disney World in Florida. Oh my gosh, if you are a Disney person, if you love theme parks, if you love Disney, you will love this series. The characters are great. They are this is like a Grumpy Sunshine character plot, and it's just fantastic. I loved this so much. I gave it 5 stars. It was the perfect start to this 25 book journey. Okay, and then the second book I read needs a little bit of explanation. There were 6 books that I was like, I will not read these. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna take them back. So what I did was I set a rule for myself that all of my exchanges that I did for those 6 books had to be another book by an author that he included in the 25 books. So the second book that I read, that was my first exchange, was the second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, which is Terms and Conditions. And this one might be my favorite. It's about the oldest brother, and he is even grumpier than the middle brother in the first book. He is set to be the CEO of the full company, but his one this is so ridiculous. His one stipulation from his grandfather to earning his inheritance is to get married. And he is such a stickler character that he decides to basically put out applications for a wife, and that doesn't work. And so his trusty assistant agrees to marry him so that he can fulfill his contractual obligation to earn his inheritance. And they fall in love along the way. This might be my very favorite one because I love the female protagonist. The assistant in this is just an incredible character. These books are silly, yes, but they're also very grounded and real, and I just love them. They are fantastic books. Couldn't recommend these enough. This was another 5-star read for me. Okay, and then probably the pièce de résistance of Eric's whole choices in this, the number one I was like, you are a rock star, was a surprising one. He got me the second book of A Court of Thorns and Roses. So this one is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, and he knew that I had read A Court of Thorns and Roses. He knew I had rated it 4 stars and I had liked it. What he didn't know was that I did not plan on continuing the series. The first book was just too young adult, too ushy-gushy romance, not enough like substance in the characters for me. Although I enjoyed the plot and the world so stinking much, I was like, I don't need to read more of this. If you've read ACOTAR, then you know, boy, that is just such a trap that you're supposed to fall into, and the author is a freaking genius. So he got me the second book and I was like, oh man, okay, I guess I'll read it. So I begrudgingly read this, and thank God I did, because this not only became my favorite book in the series, which I then speed read after that, but it turned the whole freaking series completely 180 on its head and became my favorite series that I've ever read. I will link a video up here. I did a full in-depth video on the whole ACOTAR series, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I gave it 5 stars because it's amazing. And then I proceeded to use the rest of my exchanges to feverishly buy the rest of the ACOTAR series and finish it. That includes A Court of Wings and Ruin, which I gave 5 stars. That also includes the novella A Court of Frost and Starlight, I think it's what it's called, something like that. I give it 3 star. Don't love the novella. Like I said, you can go watch that video and learn why. And then A Court of Silver Flames, which is probably my second favorite in the series, also gave it a 5 stars. So it's the best choice he could have ever made to buy me the second book in a series I wasn't gonna finish and now is my favorite series. So good job, Scrimpy. Okay, then I read this book, Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. And Christina Lauren is actually 2 authors, Christina and Lauren. And this is just such a feel-good romance. It is dual timelines. And so you follow a couple who reconnects after years of not speaking. They were childhood next door neighbors and sweethearts and first love, and something happens that you're not sure what that totally makes them go silent communication, and they haven't spoken in years and years until they just happen to run into each other and chaos ensues. You learn about their story through flashbacks and through present day, and man, it is just such a feel-good, sweet story. I think this book actually made me cry because of how sweet it was. I gave this one 5 stars. I totally recommend it. I loved this book. Okay, next I read a book called Fix Her Up. And this book, it's so sweet. Eric was like, okay, I know this one has kind of a sexist sounding title, but I did some research on it and it looks like people really enjoyed it and there was no mention of sexism, so I'm hoping it's an okay book and it's not totally offensive and sexist. Well, flash forward, it was pretty offensive and sexist. I did not like it. It's everything I do not like about the romance genre. I feel like it's the cheapest, easiest thing an author can do, which is make the entire story totally revolve around just the romance, make the character have 0 growth except for whatever her partner can do for her. It just felt very contrived, very surface level, very like explicit parts. I did not like that book at all. I gave it 2 stars and I immediately returned it and got something else because it just offended me so much. I do not recommend. A book I absolutely do recommend and fell in love with was this next book, The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I loved this book. It's about a PhD student and it's a fake dating scenario. She starts to fake date a professor that it's not like a forbidden love kind of secret. Everyone knows they get permission to date. It's not like a weird thing. And then you watch them fall in love. These characters are just so lovable. They're quirky, they're funny. This is a really freaking funny book. Total real characters, total flawed characters, and you just see them come together in the sweetest way. I loved this book so much. 5 stars, once again. Man, Eric is just killing the game with all these 5-star books. Come on. And I'm freaking picky, you guys, okay? The next book he got me was a book called Come Back to Me, and I really enjoyed this book. However, it's not my thing, but I think if you like the theme of what this book is, which I'll tell you in a second, you would really like it. So this is a military style book, and I typically stay away from military stories because I know that they come with death and sad things, and I just don't like reading sad things. But this book is about a girl who falls in love with her brother's best friend, and they have kind of a whirlwind summer romance, and then both her brother and her brother's best friend, who she's in love with, go off to serve overseas and are in a very dangerous zone. And the whole kind of shtick of the book is, you know from the beginning, one of them is dead. You just don't know which one. And you watch her go through the heartbreak of the one that is dead. And it's a very heavy book, but it is hopeful, and I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. That being said, I gave it 3 stars because it's just not my thing. I did really like it though. And if you like reading military stories, you will love this book because it was very nicely done, I thought. Okay, and then I read A Touch of Darkness, which I don't have because I returned it after I finished it. It is a Persephone and Hades story with a modern twist. I will say I loved the world build of this book. It was a fun modern twist on the Greek gods, and I loved that. Eric got it for me because we love the musical Hades Town, and we specifically love Persephone and Hades in that musical. So he did research and found out there's this whole like subgenre of all these Persephone and Hades books, and so he was like, oh my gosh, she'll love that. Which was so sweet and thoughtful, but I just did not love this book. It was a very surface level book, did not have a lot of substance at all. The plot really didn't make super a lot of sense, and it just felt very much like reading a young adult book, and I did not love it. I think I gave it 3 stars. Yeah, I gave it 3 stars because the world build was very good. I liked the twist, the modern take on the Greek gods and stuff like that, but I gave it 3 stars. That leads me to my first DNF book. I don't know what that means. It means did not finish. It's the second book. He was so sure that I would love this series, and everything about the series points to yes, I would love it. It just wasn't very well written. He got me the second one, which I got about 50 pages through, and I was like, I just am uninterested in this. I'm gonna DNF it. The next book I read is called Small Town Big Magic, and look at that cover, first of all. Isn't that just such a gorgeous cover? Oh my gosh, it's such a pretty book. But it is a book about a woman who discovers that she is living in a town that is full of witches. All of her friends are witches. She was seemingly not a witch. She starts developing magic in her like 30s and quickly becomes like the most magical person in town and saves her town, and it was a good book. I enjoyed it. I read it in like a day and a half because it was an easy, like very fast read. It was a little surface level, but it was still enjoyable to read. I really liked the characters in this book, and the love story in this book was really good too because it was very subtle and not over the top, very real and grounded. So there were a lot of good things I liked about this book, but it wasn't my favorite thing to read. I gave it 3 stars though because it was enjoyable. Okay, the next book was another exchange book. So I got another book by Christina and Lauren. This is called The Unhoneymooners, and I loved this book so much. It's about a woman who's a twin. Her twin gets married to a man that is not super great for her, who has a brother, and the twin sister and the brother hate each other for misunderstanding reasons. Right after the wedding is over, it's discovered that everyone in the wedding, all the wedding guests, got food poisoning from the catering, and the only 2 people that didn't eat the food were the twin sister and the brother of the bride and groom. And so the bride and groom make them essentially use their honeymoon and go on their honeymoon, and they think, okay, we'll go together, we'll have our separate vacations, we hate each other, but we can't turn down a 5-star resort and a luxurious 7-day Hawaiian vacation. So they go on vacation together and chaos ensues. They end up falling in love. There's nothing super unique about it, but it was boy fun to read. I loved the characters in this book. It's just, man, it's just a very fun, quick, easy read, and I really enjoyed it. It was another really funny book too, so I gave this one 5 stars. The next book I read was the last book in the Dreamland Billionaire series that just came out. Actually, it's brand new, and it is much thicker than the other ones. It's about the youngest brother, and I enjoyed this one the least, but I still enjoyed it extremely a lot. I gave it 4 stars. This one is set apart from the world of Dreamland and the theme parks and the business, and so it's got the least amount of like that theme through it, and I think maybe that's why I didn't enjoy this one as much. It felt more like a generic love story, which is fine, and I really loved the characters of this book. I love the third brother so much, and it was still a fantastic read. There's a child in this one of the love interest, and that made the story so dynamic and new and different from the other 2 brothers. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I would have given it 4.5 if Goodreads had halves. That is the bane of my existence, that Goodreads doesn't have halves, because sometimes ratings need halves, okay? They just do. This one is a 4.5, almost a 5. Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize this one was another Christina Lauren book. What the heck? Okay, so the next one I read is called Dating You, Hating You by Christina Lauren. And I really enjoyed this book, although I enjoyed it a lot less than her other 2. It felt a little more surface level than her other 2. But maybe it wasn't necessarily surface level, just that I didn't love the conflict throughout this story. So maybe it was a me problem and not really a book problem, because it was written very nicely and I really liked the characters. They were very well developed. But this one is about 2 people that meet on kind of a blind date setup situation at a party, really hit it off, really enjoy each other, start this extremely new relationship, and then their 2 companies happen to merge, and long story short, they're the top performers of their company, but they basically do the same job, and so their boss thinks it's a great idea to enter them in this competitive nature of fighting for the final job. and the whole conflict is centered around who's gonna get the job and how that affects their relationship. And it's a very well written book. I enjoyed it very much, but I just personally didn't love that plot as much as their other books. So I think I gave this one 3 stars. It's a 3.5 for sure, but you know, once again, can't do halves. So this one was really good. Definitely recommend it as well, especially if you like that kind of conflict. The thing I didn't like about it was just it was too real and it stressed me out. So, I mean, that's kind of a good negative to the author's credit, that they wrote it very, very well and the conflict was very heightened. So I definitely recommend it, but it's not my favorite of the Christina Lauren books that I've read, which I think this is maybe the last one. Are there more? Let me know. I need to investigate these girls more because I really like them. Okay, next I read one I was very skeptical about because it's called It Happened One Summer, and it is by Tessa Bailey, who also wrote Fix Her Up, which I hated, like I said. This one I was like, oh my god, I'm probably gonna freaking hate this one too. It's gonna be super sexist. I just don't love it. But I'll try it because I don't want to return another one of the same author, so I will try it. So I was very pleasantly surprised by this. It's about 2 rich sisters that basically get punished and have to go to their hometown that they've totally forgotten because their dad died, and they've inherited this rundown bar from him that they didn't even know about. And it's about their rediscovery of their childhood, their relationship with their father who has passed for like 10 or 15 years, learning about the town where they grew up and have no memories of really because their mother is super tight-lipped about it all. But they're super rich now because their mother remarried like a movie producer, and they're spoiled and bratty, and this town totally like whips them into shape. And there's just so much fantastic character growth in this, and the romance is really good too. I will say the reason I did not give this 5 stars, even though I loved this book and I loved these characters, was the guy in this, although very lovable, was very, very macho man, and I don't love those kind of characters. I mean, he was very like, I'll protect you, I'll take care of you, I'm gonna be here, a solid rock, and that's not my thing. I don't love that. But it wasn't over the top where I was like, oh, this is offending me. It was just like, this isn't what I would choose. But nevertheless, this book is honestly more about the town and the sisters and their growth than it really is the romance. The romance is more the last half of the book. I just really enjoyed this. This was such a fun read. I was very pleasantly surprised by Tessa Bailey and glad that I enjoyed this book as much as I did because Fix Her Up sucked. So I gave this one 4 stars, I think. Oh no, I gave it 3 stars. I'll tell you why I gave it 3 stars. Because the more saucy scenes are just not my flavor, okay? They're a little too rough for me, and I did not like that. So take that with a grain of salt. Then I read another one of my favorites, Red, White, and Royal Blue. Oh my gosh, what a good book. This is... I loved this book. I loved this book so much. It is about Prince of the United Kingdom and the first son of the United States president falling in love. It is so good. It is so good. I speed read this in one day, and it's like almost 500 pages, I think. It is so good. The characters are incredible. Their love story is fan-freaking-tastic. The 2 separate worlds are just very well fleshed out. I could not recommend this book enough. It was one of my top 3 favorites that I read, probably. I loved it. I freaking loved it so much. 5 stars. Incredible. Such a good book. You should read this. Calm down, Maile. Then I DNF'd Get a Life, Chloe Brown, because I got like 50 pages in and I was like, this is completely uninteresting to me. I don't care about these characters at all. So sorry if you like that, but I DNF'd it. Then I read King of Battle and Blood, which is by the same author that did the Persephone and Hades series that I did not love. So I was very skeptical to read this, but I thought I'll give it a shot. It's about a vampire king and a human princess who get married begrudgingly and fall in love, and there's a whole reason why he made her marry him in the first place. And it's just, it was a very like slow burn kind of read where you're fascinated the whole time as to where it's gonna go, and that's what keeps you reading. The characters are pretty shallow and it feels very, very young adult, but in an intriguing enough way to keep you reading. It's like if this were a YA book, I would be like, this is a great YA book, but it's an adult romance. And so it was kind of like, this is a little surfacey, but I gave it 4 stars because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was very entertained throughout it. And it was a very fascinating story how it was all tied up with a bow. But I will say it's another series and I'm not interested in continuing it. So it's like once you realize what the crux of the secret is, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and you're satisfied and you don't need to continue. So I gave it 4 stars because it was very interesting to read, but I'm not interested in continuing the series, if that makes sense. The next book I read was Things We Never Got Over, and oh, I loved this book! I loved it! It's about a woman who is kind of duped by her evil twin sister into coming to her sister's town and taking custody temporarily over her twin sister's 11-year-old daughter that she didn't know she had. Basically how the sister falls in love with the little girl and wants to become her mom, and falls in love with the town, and all the people are fantastic, and falls in love with a man, of course, too, but the growth moment is not in the relationship. The man is almost problematic in his need to take care of them. It feels a little Prince Charming-esque, like save me, just on the cusp of being offensive and not liking it. So the romance was not my favorite part of this book, but it is worth reading because of the amazing town and her fantastic growth and relationship with her little niece, and it's a really, really, really good book. I loved this book. I just loved it. It was great. 4 stars. Okay, the next book that I DNF'd was called The Deal. And it was like a sporty college enemies to lovers romance book, and it was not good. I read like 25 pages and was like, this is not for me. So I DNF'd that one. Then, okay, this is getting down to the last ones in my stack that I was least interested in reading. And so I DNF'd another one called The Hating Game, which I think was probably a well-written book. However, it was basically a carbon copy in a different business setting of Dating You, Hating You by Christina Lauren. It was like a competition over a job, and they hate each other, but then they end up falling in love and blah, 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 blah. I just wasn't interested in reading another story like that because Dating You, Hating You stressed me out so much. I'm just not interested in that kind of plot line. So I think it was really actually pretty well written. And if you like that, you probably would like this book a lot. I also think it's a movie with Lucy Hale, but anyway, beside the point, it wasn't for me, so I DNF'd it. Then I DNF'd another book. So hardcore. This is the last one I DNF'd. It was called Neon Gods, and Eric did not know, but it was a, oh, how do I say this in a safe for the internet way? It was attuned to 50 Shades of Grey, and I am not interested in reading that. If you are, great, good for you. You will probably love this book. Another Persephone and Hades kind of twist story. And the world build was really, really good. I read about 100 pages of it because I enjoyed the world build. I was very intrigued by it, but then it got to the 50 Shades of Grey moment that made me understand, oh, this is a 50 Shades of Grey type kink book, and I'm not personally into that. If you are, pick it up because you will probably love it because it was a very nicely developed world and plot so far, but it's not for me. I'm never gonna read a book like that. I'm just not interested in that. I like reading books for stories and characters and plot. I don't love the super over the top spicy bits, you know what I'm saying? So that was a real quick disappointing DNF because like I said, I really wanted to enjoy it, but I was never going to enjoy something like that. And then the last book I read was The Dead Romantics. This book was so disappointing, honestly. This was the book that I was least interested in. When I read this, I was like, this girl's clairvoyant and she falls in love with the ghost? What the heck? I don't want to read about her falling in love with the ghost. Where the heck is that gonna go? But then I started reading it, finally. I picked it up as the last book because I was just like, I do not want to read this. And I really enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed it. It was interesting. Her father dies and her father owns a funeral parlor in their little small town, and she hasn't been back for years because she was kind of an outcast because she could talk to ghosts. And she goes back to this town for the first time because of her father's funeral and falls in love with this ghost. But the thing is, it could have been such a good book. That's the really frustrating part. It was gearing up to be such a good book, but about halfway through, you realize, oh, I know exactly what's gonna happen. Like, this is exactly how it's gonna end, and I know it. I can tell from these very transparent plot devices that you think you're using in a clever way, but you're not, because you're not that good of a writer. That's a little harsh, but it just was very see-through. It was, LOL, because it's about ghosts. It was very easy to break down and boring. And then the way that it wrapped up at the end, it was gonna be a 3-star read for me. It was going to be because I really enjoyed the town. I enjoyed her complex feelings about her dad and her family and that whole dynamic. It was going to be a 3-star read for me. And then the last 30 pages were absolute trash of how the love story actually finished and culminated, and I just had to give it 2 stars because it was that bad. So don't recommend. I don't recommend this book, although it is a beautiful cover. I love that cover, but yeah, not my thing. So that is it. Whew. I feel like I've talked a mile a minute. This was such a fun challenge. I loved it so stinking much. Best present I've ever gotten. Just so thoughtful, so wonderful. What a good husband. It was so fun to read books that were out of the box that I probably wouldn't pick out for myself. I found such good gems. Thank you guys so much for watching. That is it. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!